Hi, everybody. It's S.J. Thomason with Christian-Apologist.com. I'm opening this up to see if anybody wants to join me today in a conversation. I actually just ran over to Nakasuchi's channel, and he was having a very heated debate about someone who is he calling a grifter about a person. I think it's logically plausible, possible, some guy like that, who John Maddox, who was trying to put out he tried to put out a bid to ask for money so he could take a week off to prepare for Matt Dillahunty's debate with him. And Matt Dillahunty apparently spotted this Patreon request. And so he decided that he was going to cancel this debate. And he accused John Maddox of sort of being a grifter. And so there is a lively chat going on right now on Nakasuchi's channel. And so I just thought I would mention that. That's also called The Raging Atheist. So Nakasuchi and others on that channel have taken the position that Matt was in the right and John Maddox was in the wrong. I do think it's unusual that a person would decide that, yes, I'm going to put a Patreon account so I can spend a week preparing for a debate with Matt Dillahunty so he could take off work and spend that week. I think that's rather unusual. And I did have to say, I did see the exchange between Matt Dillahunty and John Maddox on Twitter, and I found it amusing when I read it. And so I did see that. So I thought that was interesting. So I'm opening this up if anyone else would like to come in here today to chat. My two kids are sleeping right now. My husband just decided he's going to sit down for a nap. And I decided that rather than do what I probably should be doing, which is working on some research and doing something more productive, I decided that I would do something unproductive and get onto YouTube because I just felt like doing that. We are all here in quarantine in our family. Self-imposed, but also county imposed. And so we are doing that. And I'm not going to mention the particular issue that's affecting one of the members of our family, but I have mentioned it on Twitter. And unfortunately, yes, that's going on. He's doing just fine right now, which is fortunate. And so I'm, hold on just one second while I get this thing set up. Just realized Anyway, so I wanted to open this up if anyone would like to join me. Now, what I wanted to also talk about today is I thought I would talk about some of the evidence that we have in support of the resurrection. And so a lot of people are talking about the resurrection. It's wonderful that people are talking about the resurrection. And tonight I saw that there's going to be a debate between a Christian and an atheist. The atheist is called Richard Carrier on the Modern Day Debate channel on whether or not Jesus resurrected. And so we do have substantial evidence for the resurrection. Now, does that matter? That's the question that you must ask. Well, of course it matters because I'm going to go ahead and bring this Fifth Trumpet in here. One reason it matters is because that forms the foundation of Christianity. So welcome, Fifth Trumpet.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for bringing me in. How you doing?
Good. So I think I've seen you before. Have you been on my channel before?
Briefly.
Yeah, so
briefly. Well, no, not. I mean, I did one of these free-for-alls. I was just in for a second.
Oh yeah, that's where I've seen you. So are you a Christian?
Yes.
That's what I was thinking. I was thinking you're a Christian. And so let me just change up the screen here a little bit so we have a cool background. So would you like to share, excuse me, would you like to share your story a little bit?
Not necessarily, but I mean, I wanted to ask you something a little off topic from what you were just talking about. Is that all right?
Absolutely.
I just have a question. Now, I'm just curious. You had I hate mentioning names, but you had Michael Heiser on as a guest.
Yes, I did.
One of his things that he talks about the term the sons of God. So I'm just wondering, you've read his book, you've had him on the channel, and from that, can you tell me your understanding of through what he's taught, what does that term define or mean? What is it referring to?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it comes from Psalm 82, and it's also actually in some other Psalms, and it's also in other parts of the Bible. And also Jesus referenced the sons of God when he was defending himself to the Pharisees. But the sons of God refers to spiritual beings that aren't on the level of God and are not to be worshipped. But at one point, and we're told in Psalm 82, and you can also reference Genesis 6 and Numbers 13, I think it is, or 31. I got to double check the numbers. But basically what it is God has a divine counsel. And so these are spiritual beings. And at one point, between the beginning of the earth and the time of Jesus. At one point, God had allowed these sons of God, these spiritual beings, to go out and have authority over 70 different provinces that were in the ancient Near East, in and around the ancient Near East. And they went all as far as Spain. And so these sons of God went out there into these provinces, and basically what happened was they became very corrupt, and they wanted worship from people. And so people began to worship them in some of these cases, and they started giving the blessings to the most corrupt people among the human population. And so God chastised them in Psalm 82, and he basically told them that wasn't how it's supposed to be. So then the idea is Jesus came, and through his resurrection, he paid the debt, if you want to call it that, paid the debt or paid the ransom for our sins. We, before that, were bounded to the earth, but he paid the ransom to free us for our sins and to give us the ability to get into heaven through him. And so one of the other things that he did is he called out on his disciples, and he said, you must go out and go to all the ends of the earth and proclaim my name, proclaim the Most High. And so Jesus reclaimed in the Pentecost, he reclaimed all of those lands that had been given at one point to the sons of God. Now, it's my understanding that these spiritual beings are still part of the fabric of the earth. That's one of the reasons why we as Christians know that there is a spiritual battle constantly going on. And Michael Heiser also talks about the Nephilim, and he talks about how those are now a sort of demonic spirits that are still populating the earth. And so that's my understanding. Does that make sense?
Well, I mean, does it make sense? I mean, a lot of what you just said, I've looked for the verses to back it up, and I personally haven't seen it. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not saying it's not there. Maybe I'm looking in the wrong space. That's fine. But a lot of that, I need verses to back those things up, and I just haven't seen them. But I've done the reason I ask is I've done my own study on that term, and I've come up with a similar but yet different answer. And I was just wondering, because I've listened to him talk too, and the final answer he'll give is, oh, well, they're spiritual beings. And that's fine. They are spiritual beings. But, like I said, my research has a slightly different answer. That's all.
Yeah, no, I understand that, and it could, that is his understanding, and I've got, in fact, since you're mentioning Michael Heiser, I'll just show you. I've still got his books from when I interviewed him sitting here. So if anyone wants his more full explanation of what I just said, read The Unseen Realm, especially. These other books are pretty good too. The Angels book and Reversing Herman. But I have to say, it's what you're probably mentioning, what Michael Heiser has done that might go against what some people would agree to do, is he also looks into the first Enoch book. And so he weaves a lot of his knowledge from that book through the Bible. And he says that that's the Second Temple interpretation. The Jewish interpretation would have had knowledge of first Enoch. And so a lot of what he brings in there does come from that book to explain some of the passages in the Bible. And so he makes a pretty good case for it. But I'm flexible. I don't feel like that's one of those make or break sort of cases. Come on in here, Veckel. I don't feel like that's one of those make or break cases for God if we don't. It's one of those things where a lot of people might disagree. For example, even when Genesis, I've got RC Apologist here. Come on in, RC. Even in the book of Genesis, a lot of people disagree on the age and those sort of things. I don't think that's make or break. I do think the resurrection is make or break, though. I think that's probably the most important aspect that we need to know. So RC, say hello. How are you?
Hello, I'm doing fine.
Good. So do you guys know each other, RC and Fifth Trumpet?
I don't
Not
believe
really, no.
Yeah, I don't believe we met.
Okay, well, welcome to the stream. Veckel says he's at work and he can only listen for now, so we can't have Veckel join us yet. But would either you, RC, do you want to comment on anything? We were just talking about the Unseen Realm and Michael Heiser, but we can really have this conversation go pretty much anywhere.
Oh, it's been a while since I've read, Unseen Realm. I think you kind of covered the gist from what I was kind of hearing of it. Other than that, I don't really know at the moment, other than what I've been looking into at the moment, as well as research for upcoming debates at the moment.
Hmm. I've noticed, actually, RC, that I've noticed that one thing you're doing now on Twitter is you are engaging with a lot of Muslims. So what's your story on that? Have you read the Quran?
I have a copy of the Quran, specifically the Clear Quran translation by I believe the name was Mustafa Al-Kitab, and it is one that kind of breaks it down into an easier format because much like modern translations of the Bible have like them themes and highlights of what exactly it's talking about in summary. It kind of does that with the Quran, for some people who don't understand what maybe a certain verse or pattern of verses is dealing with. So it makes it a bit of an easier read for English speakers to keep up with. But it's the whole story of the whole thing started out when I had encountered some Muslims back in the old G Plus community. I debated one of them on Steve's channel called. He called himself Marshall Mathers at the time, which still is a weird notion to me, considering how music of that kind is condemned in Islam. It's basically haram if you are listening to musics with like those kinds of beats and the lyrics that are then associated with it. But he was not exactly the most conservative of the Muslims. But anyways, we debated on if Jesus is God because they deny the deity of Christ, and it was an interesting situation where he basically repeated the same old Ahmed Deedat kind of material that was out there. And if you're familiar with Ahmed Deedat, this is basically, some people suggest, some of the atheists today have made some ridiculous claims. If you go to Ahmed Deedat was pretty much the worst of it. And that's what's unfortunate, is that some Muslims will still parody or repeat these things. Like, for example, the idea of Jesus being the son of God. He ended up creating a phrase called "God has sons by the tons," because he's like, well, you see, Jesus is son of God, but Adam is son of God. So then we have these people being son of God. If this is the case, God is having lots of sex, and therefore he is having sons by the tons, like our crazy father. And so, like,
Oh my gosh.
so like, if you look up Ahmed Deedat's not just lectures but his books, he was a big polemicist, and I think the only time that he really met his match was when he debated. I forget where it was. I believe it was in Africa or New Zealand or somewhere, but he debated Josh McDowell back when he was still young, and the highlight was during the ending of the closing of the debate. He said that, find me a statement where Jesus says that I was dead, but now you've come back alive. You won't find Jesus saying that anywhere. And then immediately he's like, you said that, but I'd like to read from you from the book of Revelation, chapter 1. And then the whole crowd just lost it at that point.
Oh, wow. Yeah, yeah, that's the thing. So that's what I have really not a good understanding of the Quran because I've never read it. I have to be firstly honest with that. But it's my understanding that there's a verse in there that's really kind of vague about that God took Jesus to heaven prior to the crucifixion. So Muslims deny that he was even crucified. And of course, that is the foundation of Christianity, that he was crucified and resurrected. And so by denying that, they're essentially denying Jesus's divinity.
Right, but they would go with other means of trying to deny the divinity. But yeah, it's in Surah 4, the Surah of the woman, and it's in Ayah 157. It's called, for boasting, we killed the Messiah, Jesus, son of Mary, the messenger of God, but they neither killed nor crucified him. It was only made to appear so. Even those who argue for this crucifixion are in doubt. They have no knowledge whatsoever, only making assumptions. They certainly did not kill him. Rather, God raised him up to himself, and God is almighty, all wise. So that is Surah 4, Ayah 157 to 158. And that is their reason for holding to that belief, is merely because of the Quran. Because I asked them, what is the basis then for trying to understand not just simply the Gospels, but then as a result, the statement within 1 Corinthians 15, how you understand Josephus and Tacitus. And even the guy that I debated a while back, Marshall, he even said himself that he has to interpret and read it through the lens of the Quran. And thus, that's where we see the main presupposition between the Christian and the Muslim, is their ultimate standard and authority is based on where their religion is, where the
Mm-hmm.
Quran and the Hadith are. That is the ultimate starting point, and how they interpret and view the metaphysical reality that they live in is
Mm-hmm.
based upon the Quran, because they believe that it's possible for God to be someone who can deceive and uh, do something like that, where it's made to appear so. If he can do that, and him being all powerful enough to do so, it's very possible that that's the case, and that he deceived Josephus, he deceived Tacitus, he deceived the other people that started to write these things down. And there's of course different theories. There's the Noble Quran by Hilali Khan, two translators. They put that they put the appearance of Jesus on someone's face, and then that leads to the theory of whose face was it. Some suggest it was Judas who was given the face of Jesus, and then it was Judas who was crucified on the cross.
Oh my gosh. Well, of course,
Yes.
that's of course denying that we have two passages where Judas hung himself and then fell down head first. It's
Yep.
completely denying that.
But that's the thing too. When we try to go to those, not just for Judas, but also for the Gospels and First Corinthians for Jesus, the main objection, and especially if you look at this guy named Ijaz Ahmed who's done this stuff. There's even a Zoom call that he usually does with some guys, and he invites and welcomes Christians to attend there to ask questions. But he basically is someone who is even writing a book on an academic refutation of the New Testament, and he basically tries to say we don't know who wrote the Gospels, and that because of the textual variations, we aren't sure what's what, and that he claims that by historical means, the New Testament is an unreliable document that was made by human hands that had no sort of signature or indication or sign of God being involved within the work. So
Hmm.
that's what he has done, and as a result, with him being one of the more popular Dawa apologists out there, especially since he's working with Shabir Ali with his
I've heard of him.
revelation.
That's the only one I've heard of.
Yeah, Nijaz Ahmed is now partnered with Shabir Ali, and they're working
Hmm.
together in a Dawa team that Shabir Ali has.
Hmm.
And that's the argumentation we see from Nijaz, is that he's basically trying to approach at it from a sort of naturalistic perspective on it. But at the same time, I think he wouldn't be consistent if he was aware of some of the things that was involved there. But I've talked to Ijaz. He's a good guy. I just think that with what he is trying to do, I think he's not considering the book in which its own standards are being put, and he's judging it by a different set of criteria of which the New Testament puts itself at.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. There's a few things about the Muslim faith that I think that need to be noted, and I also want to ask you what you think about the end times in the Muslim faith in just one second. But in case people aren't aware, if you guys look into the lifestyle of Muhammad, which Nabil Qureshi did when he was raised in the Muslim faith, they're taught that Muhammad was just this very honorable prophet and all that kind of stuff. But yet he was married to 12 different women. One he married when she was 6, and he consummated the marriage when she was 9. His lifestyle, he was out there beheading people, killing people. He was very warrior-like. It was all about seizing land. The Muslim faith began in a warrior state. They initially started conquering lands and doing all that kind of stuff. It wasn't at all like Christianity, which began in a peaceful state. And it wasn't until 313 when Christianity even had power, based on Constantine finally granting Christians rights and allowing them not to be persecuted as they were pretty heavily, sporadically over the first couple of 280 years. And so we have that kind of thing going on. But the other thing I want to ask you, because I've read this, and I don't know if you guys, and this could also be Fifth Trumpet if you want to comment on this, but I've also looked into the end times, and their Antichrist, the Mahdi, is our, they're like Christ, if you want to call him that, I should say, the Mahdi is sort of like our Antichrist. And so have you looked into any of that?
A little bit. To me, I'm not too much interested within the eschatology of it, because I know that it's different on it. And by the way, it's pronounced Mahdi.
Okay.
That, and the reason why I know this is because I've been engaging with someone that was from Nabil Qureshi's similar background, because the thing to make distinctions of, and I would try to make that distinction, if anything, by just saying Ahmadiyyan Islam, because what Nabil Qureshi was a part of was a minority movement similar to what Christians have with the Jehovah's Witnesses and the Mormons. The Ahmadiyans are basically people who believed another prophet came after Muhammad, by the name of Mirza Ghulam Ahmad. And he himself claimed that he was the Mahdi that was prophesied, and thus he was the second coming at that point. And he would try to make some of these connections with his book, Jesus in India, which taught the different idea that suggested that Jesus did get put on the cross, but that he swooned. The person who made popular the idea of swoon theory was none other than Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, the guy who founded the movement of Ahmadiyya Islam. And in that movement that he started with, that he basically suggests that after Jesus swooned, he was then revived with spices and oil that was healed onto him, and then as he woke up, he traveled all the way to India, where he would die as his retirement there. And then eventually, years later, a man in India is born by the name Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, and thus he starts making this idea that he is indeed the symbolic and spiritual, metaphorical Jesus that has come as the Mahdi to bring about the revival of Islam that is needed, in which they adhere to basically their own kind of pope or modern day caliph. And they're usually, and it's the most peaceful type of group that's out there. They have a lot more peaceful doctrines compared to Orthodox Sunni Islam. But we have to make these distinctions because, again, there's even things where they go outside of what, again, normal Sunni Islamic doctrines are and teachings, because not just the Quran and the Hadith, it's also the writings of Mirza Ghulam Ahmad that are taken into high consideration, since they viewed him as a prophet at that point. So when it comes to that, that's where the distinction is. And so again, I don't know too much about the eschatology, but I do know that there is, their view that they had that Jesus himself is that. And then, of course, the debate between some people is that there's indeed the Ahmadiyans who believe that he has already come, and it's through Mirza Ghulam Ahmad that we see the coming of this figure.
Interesting. Yeah, that's all very interesting. I haven't looked into that faith really at all. I have to be honest, but I mean, I have like the little things that I've just mentioned here, but I find a lot of it really fascinating, and it's interesting too, because now Muhammad came around in the 600s, and it says in the Bible a bunch of times, it says there will be false prophets coming after me.
Well, I think he is one of them.
Yes, he's one of them, and he's lured 1.6 billion people on this planet. And a lot of people, now from what I understand, it's very difficult if you want, like, it's not that hard to leave the Christian faith if people actually want to leave the Christian faith in families, as far as I know. I don't think families are quite the way that I think. What I've heard from Nabil Qureshi and others is that it's extremely difficult. Like it's like a huge insult if you should leave the Muslim faith. Have you heard about anything like that? This idea of apostasy?
The idea of apostasy, for the most part, is that when you're in the faith of Islam, that's your deal. That's your issue. Most of the times, especially if you're in America or some of these other places, it's fine. The only issue where it starts to become something is under places within a Sharia law institute, because they have to go, depending on which of the schools that are out there. You have the Hanbali school of jurisprudence, the Maliki school of jurisprudence. You have all these 4 different major Sunni schools of Islamic jurisprudence. And there's also the Shia schools of jurisprudence, but that's a different issue altogether. But ultimately, if you do look and observe, what you will find is that the death penalty for a specific type of apostasy that's what's going to happen, is that there's going to be a death sentence that is involved. But the only way that it happens is if you make your apostasy not just public, but that you also are committing what would be known as I'm trying to remember, because I know there's 2 different forms of this word that have different meanings, but I believe it's fitna, which would be called chaos. So basically, if you're accused of causing fitna in the land of that region, they would consider that a viable means of execution. And one of the means of fitna, according to, I believe it's a hadith, is that that it includes causing and spreading disbelief. So in other words, not only if you can become a Christian and leave the Muslim faith, but that if you are openly proclaiming the gospel or sharing the gospel with someone, and this is noticed and reported to the authorities with valid witnesses, that would be considered a count of fitna, and thus would be viable means to send one to the death sentence.
Wow, that's scary.
Yes, so you can leave the faith and be an apostate in an Islamic land, but the problem then becomes of you having to basically remain hush-hush and be silent, which would be something that goes against the Christians, because Jesus says, if you love me, keep my commandments. What is one of the commandments? To go and proclaim the gospel, to go and make disciples of all nations. So basically, we're going to have to then choose Christ over the law of that particular land in light of what Jesus himself, our ultimate Lord, told us to do. So at that point, it would have to be the choice of choosing between the Islamic government versus what Christ himself had stated and ordained.
Yeah, and you know, that's one of the verses that Jesus said. He said something like, you might have to hate your parents and hate, and he said that he didn't mean it like, I mean, the way that my pastors interpreted that, he said he doesn't mean it like hate. A lot of it just meant that you might end up being disowned from your family. And it could happen with Muslims, for example, if someone feels like they really want to leave and become a Christian, that their family might disown them. And so Jesus actually portended that.
Yeah. And so there's a lot that goes on within it, but for the most part, the conversations are pretty civil if you know who to talk to. There has been some interesting people out there. Like I said, these were mostly people that grew up and just swallow the Ahmed Deedat kind of material. I occasionally get them DMing me that kind of stuff, saying that if I read these specific books or I read this article, it is a 100% guarantee I will become a Muslim. Like you have some like very, I'd say they're just inexperienced in their dawah and have not really encountered much Christians. And that's the thing. Some of these people haven't engaged, not just Muslims engaged in this thing, but even Christians. I don't think they're well informed on some of these issues. And that's what led to this upcoming quarterly project for the Defender Times Apologetics Quarterly that I'm in charge of.
Good for you.
We have the third issue of it coming out October 1st, and it's going to be on the subject of Islam. We've gotten several articles by me trying to look into this stuff, but due to issues I've been having with my hands and arms through ulnar nerve and carpal tunnel, I'm assuming related kind of symptoms that have made it difficult to continue typing as much as I was.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, trust me, you'll see how much I was able to write up in the multiple essays I've got on there. But we've got other people that have contributed their own refutations of Islam or their explorations into an approach on Islam. So we covered Sunni, Shia, and Ahmadiyyan Islam critiques. We've approached explaining to lay people what exactly are the ahruf and the kirat, which is especially something people need to know in light of what happened with Muhammad Hijab and Yasser Qadi, that has caused not just Christians, but even some Muslims to come into some questions in light of what Yasser Qadi said, and people doing the research, which was funny because I was doing research into that way before that even happened, like years before that.
Yeah, I've never really, and I can say, I mean, I think people should. I think what you're doing is a very good move, because I don't think, and I'll blame myself, I'm spending so much time learning more about Christianity and looking into the history and all that sort of thing. And I was brought back to God, thank God. But I want to say I haven't looked that much into the Muslim faith, but I commend you for doing that, because look what's going on in Europe. I mean, they're moving into Europe in a very large force. They have more kids than Europeans traditionally have. And they're going to, at one point, they're saying they could surpass the number of Christians in the world. And so this is a force to be watched, because they don't just go into Europe and assimilate. They don't become like a melting pot where they blend in with the culture. They retain their distinct Muslim culture and ways and beliefs. And so the issue is, are the European nations, if we look out, say 100 years, are they going to be more Muslim nations? Right now we're kind of seeing a move towards atheism, but I'm curious to see, and I won't be around obviously, but I'm just wondering what's going to happen next. So,
well, the main thing to keep in mind, and this is why I try to dispel people from getting into like the same Shimon or the Robert Spencer kind of approaches on this, because what's usually given is a lot of misinformation and lies that come about this. Like some people suggest this is like what you mentioned in Europe. They would suggest that what's going on there with them coming in like that and not being violent is because it's the peaceful jihad. That jihad comes in 3 stages. There is not a single Quranic or Hadith passage that goes about this, and it's completely just something that was developed by Robert Spencer for his books on jihad. But what does happen is that if you note what they do, if they're in a society like that, all they can do is just do what the Quran says, is to forbid evil and join good, to command people to do what is righteous in the eyes of Allah, and to condemn and forbid one from doing evil according to the standard of what Allah has revealed through the Quran and through Muhammad in the Hadith, which that's a complicated subject that not a lot of people are familiar with, is the Hadith, because everyone knows about the Quran, but not a lot of people know about what are Hadith. Who is Imam Bukhari? Who is Imam Muslim, who wrote the Sahih books? And then, of course, there's not just these two, but there's also Tirmidhi. There is also Sunan Abu Dawud, which you have to be careful when you go through those, because then there's the classifications of Sahih, Da'if, Hassan, all these different hadith grades that determine whether or not they accept it as authoritative because of based off of oral tradition, isnad chains, and all these other things. And that requires a science to look into to make a distinguish observation on what exactly can be viewed as authentic or taken in application. Is it historical? Can we at least use it for some kind of thing there? There's a way to utilize and understand these things, and that's why we need to not just read the material by itself, but kind of observe and study it so that we can engage with the Muslims on their own turf, given their own understandings and their own presuppositions. And that's what we are trying to do with the quarterlies, to give somewhat of a brief guide into there so that people can then have that stronghold and that step in the door to do the rest of their work.
No, I'll tell you, I have, I'm very familiar with, I mean, I have a lot of Muslim students. In fact, we have a very significant portion of our student population coming from Kuwait and the United Arab Emirates and places like that. And so I have a lot of Muslim students, and they're nice people. The Muslim population in the United States, though, is only about 1%. And I just see with SD4, that long name right there, he says in UK, the Muslim population is 4.5%. And if you go in different parts of Europe, I think Sweden's got a pretty significant population today. And so, but I think your idea of engaging people on their own platform, I think that's really wise. I want to ask you something, though, that I don't know. There's a lot of things I don't know about the Muslim faith, but I'll just ask one more thing I don't know. The difference between like the Shiite and the Sunni, which one is the more, it's my understanding, I could be wrong, is the Sunni population the more conservative? Like what would be the equivalent of a Sunni in Christianity in our different denominations?
I would say that, as far as I can tell, these would be somewhat more... It depends. I would say if you were to compare the Sunni and the Shias are more Roman Catholicism, and the Sunnis are the Protestants in this regard.
Okay.
Because the Sunnis adhere to basically the principle of Sunni following the Sunnah of Muhammad, the path and the ways of Muhammad. That's why they dress the way they do, because it's to follow after the method of Muhammad and how he dressed, eating the way they do, marrying the way they do, or any of these things. They go based off of the principles of Muhammad, who the Quran says is the best conduct and pattern of righteousness and behavior. So they have to follow that particular pattern. And thus what we see. But the issues that becomes the split becomes after Muhammad died.
Mhm.
Now there has to be the caliph. Who gets to be the caliph? I forget who the first one was at the time. I believe Abu Bakr, but I could be wrong on that.
And I want to say, wasn't one of them Aisha, one of his wives, the young wife?
Yes. Aisha was one of the wives, and she, of course, becomes part of this controversy because there's, again, the split of the side of who gets to be the caliph, and people had their choice. But then there was Ali. Ali was actually a son of Muhammad. And so it was under the impression of Ali and those who decided to follow with him that it was the right of Ali as the child of Muhammad to become the next caliph. And thus why in Shia Islam, it is of the belief that the caliphs of Islam need to be blood descendant. And so that it's by blood that this caliphate can be passed on to. So this, of course, caused wars between the two because of the Shias basically making accusations against the other members of the Sahaba, the companions of Muhammad. And they got into basically like a civil war at that point between them. And of course, doctrines then followed because Islam believes that the Quran is the eternal word of God. And this is found in Surah 85, ayah 21 to 22, because it talks about this is a glorious Quran preserved in an eternal tablet. And that refers to the eternal tablet that resides with Allah. And he started to write on the tablet. And then the tablet contains not just the Quran, but the previous revelations like the Torah and the Injil, as well as what happens in society. So in other words, a sort of form of predestination is founded within the tablet at that point, not just the revelations. And so with Shias, they believe that the Quran is not eternal, but rather that the Quran itself is a created thing, because if the Quran was eternal, then that questions, is Allah then really just Allah? Because if Allah is eternal, but the tablet is eternal, then wouldn't this basically be the form of shirk, of associating partners with Allah, that there's someone that shares an attribute with Allah at that point? So that caused that debate. But of course, then later on, they started teaching ideas about their 12 imams or 5 imams, depending on the different split. But either way, they taught that the imams were infallible, they were without sin, and that their statements were righteous, free from error. Very much similar to what we see with the ideas of Catholicism, except they go a little more with the idea of sinlessness and all that. But they state that their proclamations are free from error. But even further, they attribute to the imams, based on what I've done my research on, in some of the hadith and commentaries, they attribute to the imams attributes that only belong to Allah. And in fact, one of the interesting things about this, where I think Shia Islam is scary during these times of the pandemic, there was a video that I saw where a Shia imam walks into a hospital and pulls out a vial, and he puts it on his finger and he starts rubbing it on the lips and the hand and the head of this man, saying, "This is from Ali." They're saying that some kind of essence in there is from Ali, one of the sons of Muhammad, and says that as he does this, the man will feel better. And then that imam walks out of there and starts to continue doing the same thing to other people. And he did that because the man had COVID. He said that the thing from Ali would cure the man of his COVID-19. And so he would continue carry on doing the same thing to other people. And they would gather in large closed communities, saying that it's no worry for them. Ali will protect them from COVID. So there is some problems that will happen in the Shia Islam, and that's why I prefer Sunni Islam at that point.
Wow. Yeah, and I can tell you now, my son has COVID. I don't know if you saw that. I posted that on Twitter. He just got diagnosed on Wednesday morning, unfortunately. And yeah, he's doing okay. But he's sleeping right now. So is my other son and my husband. They're all sleeping, which is why I decided to make a video, because my husband went back to sleep, but those two haven't even woken up. But I had my other son tested yesterday and he tested negative, thank God. But my first son, my youngest son, he's got, he just has, here's the symptoms. He only has a cough and he has what is he had a sore throat at one point. Then he's just got a little bit of a cough and a stuffy nose. So I just thought he had a cold, and we went to the doctor just to give him a peace of mind. And it turns out he had COVID. And we were like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. So the whole town, I mean, we're on lockdown, we're quarantined. I'm so bored. I can't go anywhere. It's only been 3 days, but that stuff's scary. I tell you what,
yeah.
I mean, you can get it super easily, because he was wearing a face mask. He was doing all that stuff, except for at lunch. He was, he's at school at lunch, he's eating in the cafeteria. So they took their face masks off for that. And they were hanging out with their friends. So now another one of his friends also has COVID, unfortunately. And so it's scary stuff.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you can't play lightly with that. And it's the imam for doing that. I mean, come on, he is risking himself, of course, too. If you're going around touching people who've got COVID, you're risking it. I mean, my son now, he's in his room. He's actually in quarantine in our house, in his room. And I feel badly for him, because we have a little towel under the door so the air doesn't, it's really bad. And we make his food and we bring it to right outside the room in this little table that we have set up there, so he can just open the door and grab his food and go back in his room. So it's just a real, it's hard.
Well, at least y'all are playing it safe compared to some people.
Yeah. Oh yeah. We're not, I would never, number one, I wouldn't want to, I actually have gone out on my bike and taken a bike ride, but I wear a mask the whole time, and I stay far away from any people. If I see people coming, I like swoop over just in case, because I haven't been tested, but I don't have any symptoms either. And so I have to be tested before I go back to my school and teach. But I have to also wait it out with my son. He's got a 10 days incubation period here. And then my other son's got till October 8th. And so we have to wait till October 8th, and then we're all going to go get tested again. So
yeah,
I'll say, I think they should incorporate that into their guidelines. Like, not only do you have to wear a mask and stay 6 feet away, but you have to put a towel under the door to block the air.
Yeah, I mean, we have to. Well, I mean, they're pretty, I was really surprised. The county called us. I mean, first the high school called about 4 or 5 times after we reported it. I sent the doctor's note to them, and they called about 4 or 5 times and wanted to know exactly where he was sitting at lunch and all sorts of other details, which teachers he had and those sorts. I mean, the high school knew the teachers, but then the county called me. The county wanted to know every kid that my sons have hung out with in the past 2 weeks. So I had to name the kids, and they of course played basketball also with their coach. So I had to name the coach, the basketball team, all that kind of thing. So there's just all these people that he's interacted with. And so it's like a small city, unfortunately, and I even found out on Twitter, one of my friends who lives in this area, he said his granddaughter was taken out of school on Wednesday when this announcement came out that she had been apparently sitting next to, he thinks that she was probably sitting in the same room as my son. They're in the same exact grade in the same high school. So she had to get out of school because of that. And so I thought, oh my gosh, my son is it's terrible, this whole thing. So yeah, so that's interesting with the Islam group and that sort of thing. Have either of you guys looked into, because it's funny, when I took a long time ago when I was in college, I took world religions, and it was funny because they didn't spend any time barely covering Christianity, and they didn't spend that much time covering Islam at all either. They spent tons of time covering Hinduism and Buddhism. Like, that's what pretty much was the whole focus of that class. And so have you two looked into those two faiths at all?
Briefly, I've not done much on Hinduism. I'm still trying to get around to that. But with Buddhism, I've gotten mixed things, because like from what I had looked up in some sources where Christians have took the time to read some of this and point some of the stuff out, and then I start to do my own research, I found different ideas about Buddhism, such as, is Buddhism theistic like some say, or as other scholars say, is it atheistic? Mm-hmm. There's even some monks that have suggested that there is no concept of deity in Buddhism, and thus Buddhism, being the issue of enlightenment, is the idea of spiritualism within natural aspect, and that there is the rejection of the supernatural at that point. There is a rejection of these things, and it's more so trying to affirm what nature is revealed. Mm-hmm. So there's basically a lot of things where basically it falls under the system of atheism and naturalism that this stuff happens. But at the same time, with the rejection of things, for example, like some have suggested in a critique, Keith Thompson, for example, mentioned this in his essay looking at a presuppositional approach to world religions. Buddhism denies the existence of the soul. And I even asked this question to some Buddhists I encountered, and they would confirm, yes, Buddhism rejects the existence of the soul. But do you know what one of the doctrines that does get taught in there is?
Reincarnation, though, right?
Exactly. And this is one thing you can actually find this with a discussion I had with he went by several names back then. White Engine.
Oh yeah, I know him.
He got into a big argument with me because he's trying to suggest, that these all these other religions are valid and have a teaching of the same kind of truth, but they get some things wrong. And he was like, Buddhism denies the existence of a soul. And he says, no, it doesn't. And I'm like, yeah, it does. I've talked to people that even confirm this. He's like, and yet reincarnation is taught. He's like, but how can reincarnation be a thing if Buddhists don't have the existence of the soul? I'm like, exactly my point, and that's why Buddhism is problematic there. But
well, I think there's different sects in Buddhism. I think there's some, like kind of like how Christianity has different denominations. I think that maybe there are some that do believe that, and maybe there are some that believe differently.
Yeah. So there are some that do affirm different things. Like I mentioned, there's some that do believe in the supernatural and deities of some sort, and then there's some who are atheistic and they have their own case. I just personally, based off of what I have observed and the readings that I have looked into, and where their claims of going back to the earliest they can, all the way to the Buddha, is that the idea is naturalistic in its notions, and that it's more so a spiritual sense that even an atheist can be spiritual in that regard. And thus, that's where I think their idea in Buddhism is more accurate to, say, the deities and the supernatural notions. But either way, if we go with the supernatural ones, we can still find problems such as the idea of pain or evil or rape or murder. These are all illusions, because suffering is an illusion. Suffering is an illusion you must extinguish to no longer feel these pains. But however, if it is an illusion, then how is it that the case? And if that's the case, that these things are illusions, then what is morally right and wrong on an objective level? And there is no objective moral grounds at that point. It's clearly subjective, or even to some degree non-existent, since it's all illusionary and therefore not real. So then how can you even justify or know that? What is the epistemology or the foundation thereof within the Buddhist worldview, whether it be atheistic or whether it be the supernatural one?
Yeah, no, that is very interesting. And I think that's like what C.S. Lewis was talking about with dualism. He said one of the things about some of the pantheistic faiths is they have good and evil on an equal plane. And what Christianity says is you have good, and then evil is this corruption of the good. And so like Satan's fall from heaven is sort of symbolic of the corruption of the good with the evil. So initially Satan was considered, Lucifer was a son of God, was supposed to be this beautiful being. And of course he got very full of himself and prideful. And then he decided he was on God's level. And so God gave him the golden boot.
Yeah. So there would be my particular thing. And that's what's interesting about the approach there, is because based on just the criteria there, which, you have objective morality, epistemology, in other words, how do we know what we know? Can we even obtain that particular knowledge? These are all issues about the preconditions of intelligibility. And at that point, we have to ask, can these religions fit that? And I'm suggesting, based on if we observe what the Bible says and study what the Bible says, we can have that knowledge within Christianity. And even if we don't study as much on these other religions, which I at least try to put some effort into studying as much as I can, the next quarterly we'll be dealing with polytheism, an issue that I think is often overlooked and hasn't done much research. Even Ocean Kiltoy himself has mentioned that it's very difficult to find material that does a faithful study on it, that doesn't just result to conspiracy theories or crazy lies that are made. So that's why I want to try to be faithful and honest to the research on it. And thus, when I asked, what's a good book to look into it, I've gotten like 10 to 15 different titles, because there's like various forms of polytheism, like Hellenism, the Norse and the Greek forms of it, and all these other ones out there. I even have a few polytheistic friends in real life, one of which that I would go karaoke with at times. He was of the Norse type, and thus I forget what it was. He had a Norse pagan symbol on as a necklace, and he wore like these guards on him, his wrist guards on him, that were definitely embellished with some sort of Norse Viking kind of a thing. But yeah, like polytheism, Buddhism, Hinduism, if we know the necessary means of the preconditions of intelligibility, and we ask these questions, what is your belief on this? And we keep pressuring more into it, kind of like how Greg Kokel talked about in Tactics.
Yeah, good book.
We get to the center of the foundation of their worldview, not just of the particular worldview of the religions in general, but even a specific person who may have a different view of their own religion compared to what the teachings actually have. That's why it's good to learn what the actual literature says as well, so you can find that kind of critique as well. But by doing so, you then provide an internal critique showing that the worldview itself of the religion cannot account for things like the uniformity of nature, the laws of logic, objective morality, the possibility of knowledge. All these things can be found to be demonstrated as impossible in that worldview. But in Christianity, out of all of them, it comes out as the one that's on top in terms of these things when we evaluate. So that's how I'm going to be debating one particular Muslim in the future, is taking that approach to Islam and showing how it's problematic from a philosophical point.
No, that's interesting. I want to say thank you to John. He did a super chat. So thank you so much. He said golden boot, golden. I also want to say thank you to Flash Gordon for all of the dietary advice. I'm a big fan of turmeric. Actually, I get fresh turmeric at Publix and I put it in my freezer and I use it in all my shakes. So I'm a very big fan of that. And sometimes I get ginger too. So I like the idea of healthy foods. I also want to just say something really quickly. I've got the Spectrum guy, our cable person, is coming out here to take a look at our system because we had a couple very shaky days on the internet yesterday and the day before. I was supposed to make a video yesterday and I just couldn't because the internet was so messy. And so now it's working, but when they get here, I'm going to have to go because they're going to have to obviously turn this internet off. And so I don't have that much time because I just got a notice that says they're on their way. But I wanted to ask you two, Fifth Trumpet, NRC, that's Reformed Christian. So I want to know what kind of Christian are you? what do you follow? What do you guys follow?
I'm a Presbyterian with a Puritan idea of belief. I don't know about trumpets.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, me, I would be non-denominational. I just go with the Bible. I like to do Bible study, so I don't belong to a organization or a denomination. I would just go with, straight Bible teaching study.
And welcome, Smokey Saint. We were just asking what kind of what denomination of Christianity. So I like the idea of the Bible as well. I'll agree with that.
Cool. Well, yeah. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it, SJ. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. You've been stirring up a lot of trouble over on the internet.
All the time. I'm glad you're enjoying the show, though.
Yes, it's hilarious. Smokey definitely speaks his mind. If you guys haven't followed him, actually go to everyone's channels here. I don't know if Fifth Trumpet has a channel, but I know RC does, and so does Smokey. So you guys are going to want to definitely like and subscribe to their channels if you haven't had a chance yet.
If I have a wrench, I can post the link. If you want to give me one for a minute.
Oh yeah, I can give you a wrench. I don't think. Let me see.
Hold on. Let me say something.
I'm not sure how I can. Oh yes, you get to say something.
Yeah, if I say something in chat, then you can.
I'm gonna have to go over to YouTube to do that because I'm actually looking at. There you go.
Yeah. It should just pop up in your StreamYard there.
Okay, let me see if I get the option here. Put user in timeout or block user. No, those aren't
Okay, that's it. Okay, never mind.
Those
No,
aren't the
it's okay.
options.
It'll be a later thing. It'll be a later thing. It's okay. I came over because I saw you were live and had a free for all, and I got kicked out of Ronnie's chat. So and his room. So I figured
I
I'd
tried
come
to
over
get
here.
in there. It's so funny
Yeah.
you got in there.
I triggered Donkey Brains into oblivion, so it just kind of ended up, yeah. So I figured I'd come over and say hi. It's such a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, hi. Well, I wanted to say that I actually, that's where I started off. I had this free time right now, and so I thought I'd make a YouTube thing. And I went in over there and I jumped onto the channel. I was waiting in the back room for probably, it seemed like 5 minutes, and I thought, forget it, I'm going to make my own video.
Nice, outstanding, love it. Yeah, they're a little picky over there about who they let in, and a couple of them are very afraid to let me in at inopportune times because I make them look ridiculous, and that's, I get it. I'd be afraid of me too.
Well, they were talking about, here's the thing that they were talking about. I don't know if you guys, Fifth Trumpet and RC happen to be in on that, but they were talking about Matt Dillahunty and John Maddox. And Smokey, now that I think about it, haven't you debated with John Maddox?
Multiple times, yes.
Okay,
Absolutely.
yeah, that's I think where I first heard you.
We've grabbed a bit of a nickname of the brothers in thunder and a bit of the debate sphere. So yeah,
like the Sons of Zebedee, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
Very cool. So, yeah. So the brothers in thunder. So, yeah. So that's one of the things that's funny is you guys actually had a pretty good handle. I forget what the debate was covering when I saw you, but I thought you had a really good handle of some scientific principles and things like that, talking about evolution and those sorts of things. I thought you did, and I think you were talking about design stuff too that seemed pretty impressive.
Yeah, I mean, Maddox and his side, standing for truth and all those guys, they're a little heavier on the science stuff, but I like to look at at least I would say common level understanding of the arguments of justification for the worldviews, whether that comes through abiogenesis of naturalism, because, let's face it, that's just one of the big key factors. One of those supporting structures is believing naturalistic origin of life, non-directed naturalistic origin of life. If that's pointed out to be mathematically impossible, which it is to the extreme, what's left with is coming to an idea of there must have been some sort of intelligent agent. Now, granted, that gets you to anywhere from aliens to deism to theism, but it at least gets you to them breaking the cycle of recognition of just full-on denial of any type of supernatural or anything out there beyond themselves, which is, this is that milieu of materialism. It's almost inside the culture that's infused them, toxified them, their perspectives and their ideas is, to not basically believe anything until it's been empirically proven or shown or validated, and this puts a struggle of burden of proof that previous generations wouldn't have experienced on the Christians.
Didn't you have a synthetic chemist on your channel? I can't remember the guy's name.
Yeah, we had James Tour. Yeah,
that's it. Yes, yeah, I've been listening to him lately.
Yeah, he very impressive man. Incredible, and what an incredible heart for Christ. If you guys, I mean, granted, his science lectures are outstanding. And he really gets down into meat of a lot of the stuff and is really driving the abiogenesis world crazy because he's basically exposing it just for religion. Yeah. And it's religion. None of this stuff has been proven. They don't even know how to get the basic building blocks of a cell to begin with. And he'll even make the point, we've even said this multiple times, you could give the biologists or the chemists all the pieces of a cell and in one place, just go ahead and, even though we have no idea how to synthesize, basically, I think most of them, you just go ahead and cut the corners and say, give it all to them, stick it in any environment they want, and they still can't do anything with it. There's no ability to reconcile where the complex coding, syntax, and basically programming language came from to make all this stuff functional and intentional. There's just no possible understanding inside a naturalistic paradigm that can justify or explain this. So it is religion. If you believe in abiogenesis, you believe in pure, unsubstantiated, blind faith supported religion. There is nothing evidentiary to your claim whatsoever. Nothing inductive, deductive, maybe abductive if you're really reaching, but no. This is not something you can rely upon as a good bet for where the origin of life came from. I mean, you really are. It's like stepping up to the roulette table and saying, yes, I will take the bet that has the 1 in 100 billion, 1 in 1 chance in 10 to 100 billion chance. Yeah, I'm going to bet on that one, as opposed to, yeah, there's probably a high probability 1-to-1 that we were designed by some sort of intelligence. So.
Yeah, that goes into Douglas Adams' puddle argument. Have you heard of his puddle argument? Oh, the puddle was just perfect for me. And so because we're here, it must mean that
I switched that around on them on one of the debates. And what I said, well, if we're the puddle, then you guys are the bottle, thinking that the bottle was naturalistically manifested around you. I think that's a more appropriate even equivocation, because all it is, it's not even an argument. It's just it's just an axiomatic insult is all it is. And we can certainly do it from our side too. We can just basically say, well, that's great. Well, you guys are this highly, designed, perfectly aligned bottle capable of holding liquid, in a container, and you think that you just naturally manifested. So you can just switch it on the other side. It's just an axiomatic ploy at whatever worldview you're coming from. It's just a useless argument.
Yeah, well, I like William Lane Craig's analogy. So he does this thing like you're standing there at one edge of the universe, and there's really close to you, there's 1,000 marksmen who are just aimed at you to shoot you, and all of a sudden you hear, and they're supposed to shoot you, they're supposed to kill you, that's their plan, and you hear ready, aim, fire, and they all shoot, but they happen to miss you,
right.
And that's sort of, I mean, it's 1,000, but we're talking about the odds are in the trillions, basically.
Yep. Absolutely. Oh, beyond. I mean, mathematical impossibility is measured at its extreme. And by the way, this is, really mathematically impossible things are considered impossible at 1 chance in 10 to the 50th power. Mm-hmm. But, there's some people that have stretched it as far as 1 chance in 10 to the 150th power. Okay, fine. I'd even give that to you. The chance of the cell actually through naturalistic mechanisms, the first cell actually emerging is 1 chance in 10 to the 100 billionth. So we're so outside, the realm of believing this is even possible, that you are just a pure religious, zealous nut bar if you believe abiogenesis at all at this point.
Well, I always say give God credit where credit's due. I mean, if you look at the cell and you look at DNA, you look at DNA code, I mean, come on, seriously.
Yeah, and anyone that wants to know about that, really, Stephen Meyer, even though he's younger, his breakdown on that stuff, what is it? A Signature in the Cell, I think is his book.
I need to get that book.
Just incredible. And he keeps it at a really nice digestible level, or at least he does to me in my impression. And really just the intricacies, not even just the intricacies, the specificity of all these functions of the different components of the cell, and the fact that they all had to work exactly the way they are working, all up front. All of this stuff had to be fully functional, doing exactly what it's doing now at the very beginning. Like even trying to philosophize any type of evolutionary or reducible complexity component of any of these things is insane. Each one of these components, which are basically almost molecular machines, for lack of a better word, all of these things had to be designed to do exactly what they do. If any of them do something slightly different, the whole system collapses. It's really a machine of such incredible, intricate precision. I mean, we don't even have the hope of matching something like that today with our modern technology. It's mind-blowing.
Yeah, one of my fears about that is, here's one of my fears of what's going on there in the academy, if you want to talk about it like that.
Sure.
Publishing stuff, like for Stephen Meyer to get in there and publish journal articles, and for other people, related scientists, if they want to publish journal articles that point to God or an intelligent design or something like that, a lot of the people running the journals are atheists, and they will not publish that stuff.
Right.
And even, who is it? The one, Hugh Ross. Hugh Ross was trying to publish something, and he said he had to find some German journal that they actually finally would let him in there publish an article on. He's a cosmologist, and so he could talk about the cosmology, and he said otherwise he could not get it published in these American journals. It's
lock and key. It's like, and you've probably heard this. I know you're inside academia, and I certainly know you've probably interacted with some of the scientific circles, is that they even have that kind of, I guess you'd call it a inside running joke idiom, like that science only progresses one funeral at a time. You basically wait for one person who's ahead of a certain field to die, and then all of a sudden you have a bunch of young, inspired scientists attempting to carry on his work or find something that falsifies it without them being able to falsify them necessarily. So, and then it's also not challenging seniority. not challenging, people, the hand that feeds you, no bite the hand that feeds you type thing. I mean, the atheists seem to want to disregard all the politics inside this sphere for the sake of just giving this unconditional faith, based bias in these people, just being beyond reproof in some of their findings and statements. And I think with anyone with a critical eye, and I think you'll back me up on this, can say that politics plays a huge role in this environment.
Oh, for sure, for sure. That's the thing. It's politics where you've published before. It's a vicious cycle, because if you try to break in there, and I can't, obviously, I'm not publishing scientific articles. I publish in business, but if you try to break in there, and from what I've heard from the people who are scientists, it's extremely difficult. And just like you said, it's politics.
Yeah. So that is one of the struggles and I know that's what James Tour's primary thing is. And that's why also, I think for his own sake, even though he's a Christian, he doesn't actually push any intelligent design components. And it's funny, because that's kind of the first criticism he gets both from Christians and atheists, because atheists will try to assume he's shoehorning his religious beliefs into his science. And that's not what he's doing at all. What he's actually doing is saying, hey, look at all the mountain of assumptions that are inside the abiogenesis sphere of acceptance. Look at the stuff that's being published in textbooks in schools, talking about how we almost have this figured out, and, pitching these really bizarre, outlandish hypotheses as actual solutions. And they're not scientific at all. They're just conjecture. And, Dr. Fuzrana is also very good.
Yeah, he is. I've had him on here.
Yeah, he's also very good at kind of pinpoint. We had him on and did an interview with him, and we were pinpointing, a lot of these errors inside the assumptions of the abiogenesis world, which is that, somehow naturalistically, I mean, you look at the lab. Oh, RC left. Oh darn. Now I'm sad. Okay. He doesn't like
RC. It was good seeing you.
Yeah, love you, RC. He doesn't like me that much. Anyway, yeah, no, I'm sorry. What was I saying?
Like what James Tour was saying. James Tour said, well, they buy a kit, and they're manhandling the kit and then pretending that it just got thrown together by itself in nature without any sort of driving force.
Exactly. That's what they think. You need basically a hyper complex, super specific, nowhere would have ever existed on prebiotic Earth microenvironment. You need that somewhere. And you need that to be basically jimmy rigged with intentional people that are actually infusing and changing things in the environment and adding and subtracting things at very specific intervals. I mean, even the clay they have to use has to be so specifically radioactively prepared. It never would have possibly even emerged on prebiotic Earth. So, I mean, when they're stretching so far outside the realm of feasibility, they're like, well, we're just going to figure out how to do it. And then afterwards, we'll find some sort of possible naturalistic hypothesis. So they're working backwards. They're just trying to justify their religion.
Yeah, James Tour, now that I think about it, I listened to one of his videos and he did a really funny metaphor. He said something like, it's like they want to figure out a cell. And he goes, so what they do, it's like they take a Corvette, they pull the engine out, then they put their jury rigged engine back in there. The engine doesn't work as well. And they pretend like they created abiogenesis.
Right, exactly. I didn't mean to come in and just steamroll over your show too. It's just part of my personality. I apologize.
Oh, no, we're good. I can go. I was telling the other two, I was telling Fifth Trumpet and RC that I can't go. I don't know when this guy's supposed to show up, but we have this guy coming to take a look at our internet in a little bit. So I'm going to have to go when he gets here, but
no problem. Yeah, no, I was really just popping in to say hi and have another quick little chat. I appreciate your stuff. I do see you occasionally in my chat, and I do appreciate your occasional presence, even if it is never so light rebuke. Smokey, I don't know if that's entirely Christian. I don't mind it. I like it. I love it. Go ahead and feel free. I do listen to all of it, by the way, too. It's not like I just completely reject it. Like I do. I particularly look for people to bring me scriptural justification for stances and all that too. But I always appreciate seeing you, SJ. Really, I do.
Oh, well, thank you. No, I think I think that you've done a good job sort of shaking things up. You definitely got the attention of the raging atheist. I mean, that guy's whole channel he used to make videos about me. And then, And then he stopped. Like, he got to know me. I got on one of his channels once, and he decided he'd stop. I think what happened was then he found you.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I think he's lightening up on the content with me too. We have a slight, I guess you'd call it maybe like ceasefire, because I'm hosting a debate. I'm moderating a debate between him and Gavin Hurlman on the 1st. So
I did see that.
Yeah, so that's going to be popping up. So I'm kind of trying to maintain a bit of my neutrality. I had to go into his stream today and kind of defend my boy Maddox, but other than that, yeah, we're kind of at a bit of a ceasefire for the most part, I think.
That interaction,
or at least I am. At least I am. I'm sure he's going to keep making content, but I'm gonna maintain my stance as neutral moderator.
So yeah, well, I definitely saw that. That was very funny. But that was what was. Now you defended. So what was going on here? So John Maddox decided that he was going to.
Do you want to really unpack all of it now?
Well, I think it's hilarious.
Okay, so Maddox basically put up, he was under the okay, I'll try to give it a breakdown quickly here. Okay, so Maddox was under the impression, and James even has an email that he sent to him admitting to this, that he was for sure getting to debate Dillahunty, and it was coming up, right? And so he posted a GoFundMe, basically using, I would say, some colorful language up to and including calling Dillahunty a charlatan, and that but basically it was a rallying cry to everyone to say, if you don't mind, I would like to take extra time off work to prepare for this debate. So it's a good debate. And so if I can get some money from you guys, basically I can justify taking the time off work and dedicating more time, to actually doing the debate. So it was basically just him asking for resources for the sake of justifying more time dedicated to preparation as opposed to his workload. So that was where it was primarily coming from. Well, Dillahunty saw that and got very upset and made a whole thing about it, and then ended up calling off the debate. So now the community has decided to pick up on this, like cockroaches on crumbs on the floor, like they are. They've decided to pick up on this, all the atheists, and go on and a big tirade accusing Maddox of being a fraud and a fleecer, and trying to get this money for the by trading off of Dillahunty's name, and just the pettiness and desperation is just at an all-time high. So I went on to Ronnie's channel to kind of at least say a couple words before Donkey Brains muted me and kicked me out because I was starting to make Dragnot look ridiculous. So anyway, that's what happened.
So that's very funny, because actually what I did see when I went over to that, because I wanted to get on there and talk about it too, because I saw the interaction. I thought it was kind of funny. But but one thing I noticed somebody did was they took a picture of Matt's channel and where he's asking for money on the Atheist Experience. He's the longest running host of that. So that.
Oh, do you have that? Can you send that to me?
Yeah, somebody did that. They took I'll get that. I'll go get that. So
yeah,
I'll
send that to me. That would be awesome.
So there's a picture of
By the way, I did post my channel in private chat. If you wanted to, you could always call.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I need to I will put your channel actually on my automatic list. I have this automatic list of, so let me just see if I can find that. Oh yeah, here we go. Okay, yeah, you guys go ahead and definitely subscribe. I'm going to go ahead and paste this in here.
And I do have a debate coming on Monday about women in trans sports, just to shout that out. That's going to be on.
Really? Which channel are you on?
Modern Day Debate.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, because I have to say, as a woman, and somebody, if as an athlete, I wasn't really an athlete when I tried to play sports, but I never was very good, except for swim team. I was pretty good at swim team. But if I had to go up against a male body, they're made with bigger shoulders and
right.
You know what I'm saying? More muscle content. There's a lot of stuff that it's not removed when a person transitions. I'm fine with people transitioning if they're fine with that, if they're an adult and they make that choice on their own.
I'm confident. Yeah, I'm confident in what I'll present, and I have a threefold argument that converges in the center, that's really essential for the sake of which is a core doctrine of leftist ideology. So I think it'll be very, very interesting. I think it'll be a fun
Good.
Day. I'm excited for my opening.
Good. And you know what? You might want to listen. I don't know if you've heard it already. I'm trying to remember the guy, Sargon Akkad. I think that's his name.
Yeah, Carl Benjamin. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. You might want to, he was in a debate, and he was, I think it was on Modern Day Debate too, on the same topic.
Oh, I should check that out. Okay.
Yeah, definitely check that out.
Might even do a debate review as preparation. That sounds like an idea. Okay, super cool.
Yeah, he brought in a ton of facts. He had all kinds of articles and things like that on that. So
beautiful. Yeah, I should check that out for sure. Yeah, he's always he's a very competent debater. Not so much politician, but very competent debater.
Yeah, Yeah. Well, listen, I'm going to go ahead and get going,
Sure.
but I want to say, if you guys want to do a little shout out on what you're working on next. And I know, Smokey, you just mentioned a debate, but if you want to give a couple more shouts out.
Sure. I got one more thing. I'm doing open mic tonight where we're probably going to have to maybe talk a little bit about the Maddox stuff. But yeah, come on in. It's open mic. You guys can bring your topics, bring your opinions, and they'll get answered. Absolutely. Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you so much, SJ.
Great. Thank you. And Fifth Trumpet?
No, I'm good. Thanks for having me on.
Do you have a channel too, Fifth Trumpet?
Yeah, I have a channel. I do Bible study. Like my videos are a little bit hard to watch. But if you are interested in those subjects, you'll get something out of it.
Cool.
But from what I was saying, people don't really watch them, but when I make the video, I actually learn from doing the study. So that's sort of its value.
Well, that's what I'll do. I'm going to actually put you and Smokey and RC into my automatic list of people in my description, because I have links to a bunch of channels in my description. So I'm going to add you three to that so people can easily access you from any of my things. So thank you so much, everybody, for coming on. Please like and subscribe and stay strong, be healthy, and do come again. And I will talk to you later.
Okay, bye.
God bless.
God bless.
Awesome. Thank you, SJ. Appreciate it. You have a great day.